A forgotten workshop holds a secret that could reshape the world. Elara, a young blacksmith from a line of crafters whose skills faded from memory, finds a Moonstone amulet left by her mentor, who is no longer with her. Its soft, persistent glow pulls her toward a quest for the legendary Moon Forge, the place where history says the very first blades were made. But this power is not a simple gift. If the forge awakens in the hands of those who seek to misuse it, an ancient shadow could return, challenging the delicate peace that holds her world together. Every step she takes is a choice that could either preserve that balance or let it fall apart completely. By the end of this journey, you will understand the immense responsibility that comes with creation and the true cost of forging a legend. Where are you listening from right now, and what is the local time where you are? The story of the Moon Forge is about to begin. What does true power look like when it is placed in the hands of one person? The amulet pulsed with a cool, urgent light as the full moon crested the sky. Elara watched, her breath catching, as a shimmering pattern of stars and mountain ridges bloomed in the air before her. It was a map, a celestial guide, pointing directly toward the treacherous whispering peaks. There was no time for hesitation. With her heart hammering against her ribs, she gathered her blacksmithing tools and a small pack of provisions, slipping away from the sleeping village under the deep cover of night. She moved with a quiet purpose, each step a silent farewell to the only life she had ever known. But the night has ears. Her departure did not go unnoticed. The village elders, who had long spoken of the Moon Forge in hushed, fearful tones, saw her absence as a portent of trouble. They believed the old legends were less a promise of power and more a lingering concern, a force that had once brought great difficulty to those who came before. By first light, they had dispatched their most skilled trackers to find her and bring her home, hoping to avert what they saw as a terrible mistake. From a higher ridge, other, darker figures observed her progress, their message carried on the wind to a master who had waited a very long time for this moment. Elara's path was a trial of both body and spirit. The mountain trails were unforgiving, with sudden rockfalls forcing her to scramble for safety. Strange, whispering voices seemed to coil around her thoughts, sowing seeds of doubt. Was she abandoning her responsibilities, trading the safety of her community for a selfish dream? Each time uncertainty threatened to paralyze her, her fingers would find the Moonstone amulet. Its steady glow was an answer, a silent confirmation that she had to trust this celestial guide over the Elder's well-intentioned warnings. This choice, to believe in a destiny she could only feel, marked a profound shift within her. She was no longer just a village blacksmith. She was a seeker walking a path laid down by legend itself. The further she climbed, the more the land itself seemed to resist. The amulet's awakening power was a beacon, stirring ancient things from their long slumber. Mythical beasts, drawn by the celestial energy, began to stalk the high passes, their presence a clear sign that the forge's secrets were fiercely guarded. The stakes were no longer just about reaching a destination. They were about surviving the journey and proving herself worthy of the power she sought. Finally, she reached the first of the towering peaks, her muscles aching and her spirit tested. The silvery light of the map began to fade, its purpose fulfilled for now. In the sudden quiet, a new sound cut through the thin air, a low, rumbling growl that vibrated deep in her bones. It echoed from the mouth of a nearby cave, a shadowy opening in the mountainside. The path forward was clear, but it led directly toward a confrontation she could not avoid. The crystalline wolf emerged from the cave, its body a lattice of sharp angles and cold, internal light. It moved with a predator's grace, blocking the only path forward through the stone pass. Alara's grip tightened on her blacksmith's hammer, a tool of creation, now her only defense. A direct fight would be hopeless. As the beast lunged, a desperate idea sparked. She raised the Moonstone amulet high, angling it to catch the full moon's brilliant rays. A concentrated beam of pure, silvery light reflected from the stone, striking the creature directly in its luminous eyes. The wolf recoiled with a pained whine, its form flickering as it was momentarily stunned by the celestial energy it was meant to guard. This was her only chance. She did not strike the vulnerable beast. Instead, she slipped past its frozen form, a choice rooted in respect for its ancient purpose. As she scrambled up the rocky trail, the wolf's recovery roar echoed through the peaks, a chilling alert to every other guardian in the high mountains. The sound seemed to multiply, carried from ridge to ridge. The consequence of her passage was now known. Exhaustion weighed on her limbs, heavier than any hammer. Could she truly face stronger protectors alone? A glance at the amulet showed its glow had dimmed, its power temporarily spent and needing to recharge. Yet her pack felt strangely heavier. A shard of the Guardian's own crystalline form had broken off during the struggle, embedding itself deep within the leather. She did not yet know this fragment was no simple trophy, but a vital key, a component of immense power required for the forging ritual itself. Her mercy had preserved a guardian, and in return, it had unknowingly given her a part of its own essence. This moral code, this refusal to destroy what stood in her way, would one day shape alliances she could not yet foresee. For now, the stakes were clearer than ever. The forge was defended by a network of powerful, awakened beings, and her presence had put them all on alert. The path ahead grew steeper, every shadow feeling watched. Pushing through a final narrow cut in the rock, Elara saw it. A thin column of smoke curled into the sky from a hidden valley below, a signal of habitation in the desolate peaks. It could be a place of rest and answers, or a perfectly laid trap. The thin column of smoke led Alara to a secluded hut, nestled beside a thermal spring. An old man with hands scarred by a lifetime at the anvil looked up from his work, his eyes narrowing not in suspicion, but in immediate recognition of the Moonstone amulet resting against her chest. His name was Kale, and he was a hermit who had long watched for the amulet's return. He offered her shelter, a warm meal, and something far more valuable, fragments of a history nearly lost to time. He spoke of the Moon Forge not as a simple workshop, but as a living entity that demanded balance. To even reveal its hidden location, a seeker must first unite three elemental essences: fire, water, and air, each a key to a different lock on the ancient door. Kale's help was not given freely. He tested her resolve by teaching her a low, rhythmic forging chant, a melody said to soothe enraged elemental spirits. Elara practiced not on spirits, but by mending his own broken and rusted tools. As she worked the bellows and hammered the metal, the chant flowing from her lips, she felt a strange harmony settle over the forge. The tools emerged stronger and sharper than any she had ever made, their metal seeming to sing with a faint, stored energy. This demonstration of skill and respect earned her Kale's tentative trust. With it came a cryptic clue that the first essence, the fire essence, was not found in any ordinary flame, but was hidden deep within the nearby geyser fields, where Earth's breath met water's heart. But knowledge came with a serious warning. Kale's voice grew somber as he told her of the Shadow Smiths, a secretive faction that believed the forge's power was meant to be seized and weaponized for conquest. They had twisted the sacred art of shaping into a practice of control, and their trackers were already closing in on her trail. The choice was stark. Did she rush forward unprepared, or take the time to learn the proper way? Alara made her decision. She would seek the fire essence first, prioritizing the wisdom Kale offered over reckless speed. This choice to learn rather than just take deepened her understanding of the forge's true legacy. It was not a prize to be won, but a partnership to be earned. The urgency of her quest was confirmed moments later when Kale pointed to a distant ridge. Dark, swift-moving figures were silhouetted against the sky, scouts for the Shadow Smiths. They were closer than anyone had expected. The race for the forge was now undeniable, and the stakes were no longer just about her personal destiny, but about preventing a great imbalance. Armed with Kale's hand-drawn map and his quiet blessings, Alara left the safety of the Vale. She ventured toward the rumbling geyser fields, a landscape where plumes of superheated steam promised both the opportunity for discovery and the ever-present possibility of a misstep. The geyser fields roared like a waking giant, a landscape of hissing steam vents and boiling mud pools. Elara moved with a cautious rhythm, her eyes fixed on the Moonstone amulet. Its cool surface warmed perceptibly whenever she neared an unstable patch of ground, the stone's subtle magic detecting the intense heat signatures hidden just below the surface. It was a delicate dance, a test of patience where a single misstep could mean a scalding encounter with an unpredictable eruption. Her goal was the field's chaotic heart, a massive central geyser that spewed a continuous plume of superheated water and rock high into the thin mountain air. There, suspended in the violent updraft, she glimpsed a pulsating, orange shard, the fire essence itself. It was a piece of the Earth's core, impossibly molten and perpetually burning. To retrieve it, she would have to cool it just enough to handle. Using a water skin and a scrap of thick leather from her pack, she fashioned a crude pouch. Timing her move between the geyser's powerful bursts, she hurled the water-filled pouch directly into the ascending spray. A deafening hiss filled the air as water met unimaginable heat, and for a moment, the geyser's fury subsided. The molten shard fell, sizzling, onto the rocky ledge before her. Its outer shell hardened into a crystalline form she could safely touch. The moment her fingers closed around the warm stone, the ground shuddered violently. A minor earthquake rippled out from the central geyser, a clear signal that something fundamental had been disturbed. As the fire essence made contact with her amulet, it flowed into the Moonstone like liquid sunlight, bonding with it and causing the pendant to flare with a new, fierce warmth. The connection was immediate, a surge of raw, creative power that coursed through her veins, but the tremor had also been a beacon. From the edge of the fields, shouts echoed. A patrol of shadow smiths, drawn by the seismic event, now advanced toward her position. Fatigue was a heavy cloak on her shoulders, and the unstable ground mirrored the turmoil in her heart. Could she truly control this power, or was she merely a vessel for a force that would eventually consume her? The shadow smiths closed in, their dark forms moving with a grim purpose. A desperate idea, born from her newfound connection, sparked in her mind. She focused on the energy now humming within the amulet, channeling it into her simple blacksmith's hammer. The tool glowed with a brilliant, white-hot light. She did not swing it as a weapon. Instead, she slammed the hammer's head against a large, flat rock. The impact released a blinding flash of pure light, a temporary sun that forced her pursuers to recoil, shielding their eyes and crying out in surprise. In that moment of disorientation, she turned and fled, scrambling over the treacherous terrain and into the relative cover of a nearby pine forest. The shadow smiths now knew she possessed one of the keys, and their hunt would intensify. That night, hidden in the damp silence of a forest cave, the amulet's new energy bled into her dreams. Visions of the forge's past flickered behind her eyelids, scenes of immense creation and a cataclysmic shattering. The stone pulsed against her skin, a gentle but insistent pull guiding her gaze north, toward rumors of a sky-bound temple where the next essence awaited. The northern cliffs were a vertical maze of crumbling stone and ancient, groaning vines. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that echoed the howling wind tearing at her clothes. Far below, the geyser fields were a mere smudge, and the shadow smith archers were dark specks, taking aim. An arrow whistled past her ear, chipping the rock beside her hand. She pressed herself flat against the cliff face, her fingers digging into a fragile network of roots. Trusting the amulet's gentle pull, she shifted her weight onto a vine that looked impossibly thin. It held, strong as iron, guiding her upward toward the temple suspended in the clouds. This was the Sky Temple, a structure of woven stone and living wood that seemed to breathe with the mountain gales. Its entrance was not a door, but a series of intricate wind channels, each requiring a specific harmonic tone to unlock. The amulet's light pulsed in time with the rushing air, and Elara found herself humming the low forging chant Kale had taught her. The notes resonated through the channels, calming the turbulent winds into a coherent pattern. One by one, the harmonic locks disengaged, revealing the inner sanctum where the air essence swirled inside a crystalline lattice, a captured storm waiting to be freed. As her fingers closed around the humming crystal, a deep shudder ran through the entire temple. The ancient vines groaned, and pillars of stone began to tilt and crack. The temple was collapsing, its purpose fulfilled. In her rush to escape, Elara heard a desperate cry. A small, owl-like guardian was trapped under a fallen beam, its wing pinned. The archers below renewed their assault, their arrows finding purchase in the temple's disintegrating walls. She had a clear path to the descending vines, a chance to save herself and the essence. But leaving the guardian felt like a betrayal of everything the forge stood for. She scrambled back into the crumbling sanctum, using all her strength to heave the heavy stone off the creature's wing. It hopped free with a grateful hoot, pressing a single, iridescent feather into her hand before leaping onto her shoulder. The moment her skin touched the feather, a sensation of incredible lightness filled her. She took a running leap toward the edge as the floor gave way, and for 3 breathtaking heartbeats, she did not fall. She drifted, descending slowly through the raining debris as arrows shot harmlessly past. The guardian, whom she named Lyra, clung tightly, its large eyes watching the chaos below. From a vantage point across the chasm, the leader of the Shadow Smiths observed her escape. He lowered his hood, revealing a face marked by the same scars as Kale's, a former ally who had chosen a much darker path. This was no longer a simple conflict over power. It was a deeply personal schism, a battle for the soul of their shared legacy. The temple's final collapse into the clouds was a grim warning. The forge's ancient protections were failing, and the window to secure it was closing fast. With the fire and air essences now united within her amulet, Alara and her new companion began their careful descent. Their path now led downward into the mist-shrouded marshlands where the final key, the water essence, lay hidden in the deep and silent bogs. The air grew thick and heavy as Alara and Lyra descended into the marsh. A carpet of green algae coated still pools, and gnarled trees rose from the murk like ancient hands. Each step was a careful choice, the ground soft and uncertain beneath them. Remembering the air essence, Alara focused its energy, creating small, stable pockets of clear air around her feet that let her walk across the deceptive surface without sinking. The amulet pulsed with a cool, guiding light, its glow reflecting in the dark water and leading them toward an ancient, submerged cavern. Within its silent chamber, held in perfect stillness, hung the water essence, a single, perfect droplet that seemed to float in place, never falling. But the guardian of this place was not a creature. It was the marsh itself, a weary presence that took shape as a shimmering, ethereal form. It did not speak in words, but in feelings, a deep and gentle sorrow that touched the air around them. It asked a price for the essence, not a thing to be given, but a memory, a piece of the seeker's own past. The spirit's wish was clear, to receive something of true meaning, a fragment of personal joy. Without pause, Elara closed her eyes and offered a cherished recollection from her childhood. A bright afternoon, learning her first hammer strokes at her mentor's side. The memory flowed from her, its colors softening just a little, its warmth gently fading. In return, the water essence drifted into her waiting hand, cool and impossibly light, before joining the amulet. The stone now glowed with a steady, tri-colored light, a complete and powerful whole. This selfless act was tested at once. A bitter, sharp smell touched the air. The Shadow Smiths, unable to follow her into the deep marsh, had chosen to taint its waters, using strange mixtures to draw her into the open. Fish rested unmoving on the surface, and the marsh spirit trembled with distress, its sorrow turning to a swift, protective anger. It now saw Alara as part of the harm, another person bringing change. She had to show her purpose was not the same. She did not raise her amulet in threat. Instead, she opened her mind once more, sharing the vision of the moon forge's true purpose, not as a tool of conflict, but as a source of balance and renewal. She showed the spirit the potential healing the forge could bring, a gentle answer to the taint now moving through the land. The spirit's anger eased, recognizing the honesty in her heart, a quiet contrast to the harsh ways of those who opposed her. The stakes were no longer just about an old tale. The troubled waters were already flowing downstream, toward early communities that relied on them. Her failure would mean difficulty and unease for many innocent lives. Her quest had become woven with their well-being. As the three essences fully joined within the amulet, their shared power flowed outward. The very light from the stone took form, weaving itself into a glimmering, spectral bridge that arched over the troubled mire, pointing without doubt toward the highest, most distant peak. The final part of the journey was now clear, and the call of the moon forge was a certain presence in her soul. The light bridge dissolved behind her, its final glimmer swallowed by the jagged peaks. For a moment, there was only the wind and the steady pull of the amulet against her chest. Then the shadows themselves seemed to move. From behind every rock and crevice, dark-clad figures emerged, surrounding her in a silent, perfect circle. It was a full battalion of shadow smiths, their weapons already drawn. Their leader stepped forward, the same scarred man who had watched her escape the temple. He did not speak, simply raising a hand to signal the advance. Instinct took over. Alara's hands flew up, not with a weapon, but with the amulet glowing fiercely. The three essences within it surged to her call. A wall of shimmering heat erupted from the ground, a barrier of concentrated fire essence that made the air waver. Simultaneously, she channeled the air essence, summoning a whirlwind that lifted dust and loose stone, creating a blinding screen around her position. It was a desperate, defensive maneuver, but it was not enough. The shadow smiths pressed through the chaos, their movements disciplined and relentless. Lyra, her owl-like guardian, shot from her shoulder with an angry screech, diving directly for the leader's face. Her sharp talons forced him to recoil, breaking his concentration and buying Elara a precious few seconds. This was the moment of true conflict. She could feel the forge's power, asking to be unleashed in a wave of overwhelming force to clear her path across the mountain. The thought unsettled her. This was not the balance Kale had spoken of. This was the very shift she feared, so she made a different choice. As the shadow smiths pressed their assault, she focused the light of the amulet into solid, glowing threads. She wove them in the air, creating nets of brilliant energy that snapped out to entangle her opponents, binding their arms and legs. They were caught, unharmed but immobilized, their angry shouts muffled by the howling wind. It was a technique of pure creation turned to restraint, a reflection of her deepest values, but this careful choice had a cost. The intricate weaving demanded more focus and time than a simple, forceful blast would have. While she carefully disabled a dozen soldiers, others flanked her position. One managed to get past her defenses, his blade grazing a shallow mark across her arm before her next net of light caught him. The sensation was sharp, a clear reminder of her limits. In the confusion, the battalion's leader, now free from Lyra's harrying, lunged not at her, but at her pack. He tore it from her back, his fingers closing around the hand-drawn map Kale had given her. With a triumphant shout, he and his remaining forces fell back, melting into the rocky terrain as quickly as they had appeared. Elara stood panting, her arms stinging, surrounded by her captured but living opponents. She had held them off, but she had lost the map. They now knew the forge's location. The quest was no longer a secret pilgrimage. It was a race. The scale of the opposition was deeply clear. This was not a fight against a few trackers, but a struggle against an entire organization dedicated to a distorted vision of power. Her heart ached with the weight of her decision. Using the power so directly, even for defense, felt like a step away from the gentle harmony she had felt in Kale's workshop. Had she already taken the first move down a similar road as the shadow smiths? There was no time to dwell on the doubt. The amulet blazed, its beam of light cutting through the unsettled dust and pointing like an arrow into a narrow, hidden canyon she had not seen before. Pushing forward with a renewed and urgent purpose, she followed its guide. The very air within the canyon entrance began to hum, a deep, resonant vibration that she felt in her bones, a tangible promise that the moon forge was near and that its long stillness was ending. The canyon walls pressed in so close they seemed to breathe, whispering with the layered voices of every smith who had ever walked this path. Their echoes were not just sounds, but lessons, guiding her hands as she studied the ancient runes carved into the stone. The challenge was clear. A ceremonial blade lay broken on a stone altar, its pieces dull and lifeless. To proceed, she had to reforge it, not with ordinary fire, but with the essences she had gathered. As she set up her portable forge, the canyon's illusions coiled around her mind. Visions of her village turning their backs, of Kale shaking his head in disappointment, of her own hands failing to hold the hammer, all sought to break her concentration. She focused on the rhythmic chant, using the sound as an anchor against the mental pressure. Then came the scouts, two shadow smiths, who emerged from the darkness, hurling small, disruptive charms meant to crack the molten metal. Lyra dove at them, a furious blur of feathers and claws, buying Elara precious seconds. The forging became a fluid dance, her hammer falling in time with her heartbeat as she channeled the fire essence to heat the metal, the air essence to steady her strike, and the water essence to temper the steel. In a moment of pure inspiration, she reached into her pack and drew out the crystalline shard from the wolf guardian. She set it into the blade's hilt, a final, crucial component. As her hammer fused it into place, the shard flared with a soft, blue light, its guardian magic weaving through the metal. The completed blade glowed with a unified, silvery radiance, its edge singing with a faint, harmonic hum. The moment it was whole, the canyon fell silent. The runes on the wall blazed, and a vision flooded her senses. She saw the first smiths, not as solitary masters, but as a community working in perfect harmony, their greatest creations born from shared purpose and personal dedication. The message was unmistakable. True power was a collective endeavor. A section of the canyon wall slid away without a sound, revealing a new path. But standing guard were the canyon's sentinels, tall, luminous spirits, who assessed her with ancient, knowing eyes. They did not speak, but she felt their judgment, a weighing of her every choice. She did not raise the blade in threat. Instead, she laid it flat across her open palms, an offering. The sentinels observed the wolf shard, glowing within the hilt, a permanent record of her compassion. They saw the unity of the three essences, a balance she had not broken, but honored. After a long, silent moment, they bowed their heads and faded into the stone, their approval granting her passage. The restored blade was more than a key, it was a testament to her journey. As she stepped forward, the path opened into a vast, circular chamber, and there it was, a colossal gate of pure, polished moonstone that rose to impossible heights. Its surface was a living map of the heavens, constellations of unknown stars, shifting and realigning under the gentle light of her amulet, as if welcoming her home. The polished Moonstone gate was a silent, breathing sky. Elara raised the ceremonial blade, its hilt glowing with the wolf shard's soft light, and pressed her amulet against a central indentation shaped like a crescent moon. The constellations on the gate's surface began to swirl, their celestial patterns realigning with a low, resonant hum. She closed her eyes, and the forging chant Kale taught her flowed from her lips, no longer a simple melody, but a key turning in an ancient lock. As she sang, she channeled the three essences, feeling the fire's warmth, the air's clarity, and the water's flow merge into a single stream of power that poured from her into the gate's heart. The gate spirits rose from the stone, not as enemies, but as impartial judges. Their presence was a pressure in her mind, a cascade of doubts and fears. They showed her visions of the forge's power, twisted into weapons, of villages falling silent under a shadow she had failed to stop. The chant faltered on her lips. Instead of resisting, she opened her mind completely, inviting them to see her true intent. She offered them the memory of mending Kale's tools, the feeling of sparing the crystalline wolf, the selfless gift of her own memory to the marsh spirit. She had nothing to hide. Her desire was not for control, but for preservation, a wish to see the forge's legacy continue in balance. The mental pressure ceased. The spirits, recognizing the honesty woven into her very being, shifted from judges to allies. Their energy joined hers, amplifying the chant and guiding the final alignment of the stars. With a deep, grinding roar that shook the mountain, the Moonstone gate split down the middle, sliding open to reveal a breathtaking staircase, woven from pure, solidified light. But the moment came at a cost. The amulet at her chest dimmed to a faint glimmer, its stored energy temporarily spent by the monumental effort, and the gate's opening roar was a signal. From the canyon, mouth below, answering shouts echoed, followed by the unmistakable sound of many moving at a run. The main shadow smith force was now advancing directly toward her. There was no time to rest. The open gate was a point of no return. To step onto the luminous stairs was to accept that the final chapter for the forge would begin in mere moments. She could already see the leading edge of the approaching group, their forms swarming into the canyon behind her. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Alara placed her foot on the first step of light. It felt solid and warm beneath her boot, with the gate spirits now a calm, supportive presence at her back, and Lyra circling anxiously above. She began her ascent, each step carrying her higher toward the place where the first blades were made, and where her own character would be shaped in its final, defining test. The air within the moon forge tasted of cold stone and ancient starlight. A massive, floating moonstone hung at the chamber's heart, its gentle light washing over anvils and bellows that seemed to breathe with a soft, internal glow. Elara did not hesitate. She stepped forward and placed her amulet into a depression at the center of the main altar. The moment the stone settled, the entire forge awoke. A low hum resonated through the cavern as tools flared with silver light, and the central fire, fueled by the captured essence of stars, roared to life with a clean, eternal flame. But the triumph was short-lived. The grinding echo of the Moonstone gate being forced open reverberated through the chamber. The shadow smiths poured in, their dark forms a stark contrast to the forge's pure light. Their leader, Vorlag, strode to the forefront, a grim smile twisting his scarred face. In his hand, he held a corrupted version of her amulet, a jagged shard of obsidian that pulsed with a sickly, violet light. He spoke of her mentor, revealing that the old man had not simply moved on from his work, but had faltered here, unable to bear the forge's true potential and retreating into a life of quiet fear. Vorlag's voice was a venomous lure, tempting her with visions of a blade that could command armies and reshape kingdoms, a creation of absolute power that would end all conflict through sheer, undeniable force. He offered her a place at his side to share in this dominion. Alara's fingers tightened around her own, simpler hammer. The forge's energy sang through her, a symphony of possibilities, and she could feel the path to such a weapon opening in her mind. It would be so easy to take that step, to craft an answer to all the world's troubles with a single, definitive stroke. But then she remembered the crystalline wolf, the marsh spirit's trust, and Kale's quiet lessons on balance. Power without compassion was not creation. It was merely a different kind of destruction. She met Vorlag's gaze and gave a single, firm shake of her head. In that moment, she was no longer a seeker. She became the forge's guardian. Vorlag's smile vanished, replaced by a cold fury. He barked an order, and his smiths fanned out, igniting secondary forges with their own corrupted flames, the air filling with the acrid scent of metal being stressed and twisted. The stakes were now absolute. The energy in the chamber was a palpable force, and the first blade to be completed here would imprint its intent upon the world. A weapon of domination would cast a long shadow, while a tool of preservation could mend the fractures slowly forming in the land. Elara took a steadying breath, the weight of her choice settling on her shoulders not as a burden, but as a purpose. She lifted her hammer, its head catching the pure light of the central fire, and faced the anvil. The contest for the soul of creation had begun. The chamber echoed with the frantic rhythm of two opposing hammers. Elara worked with a fluid grace, channeling the essences through her hands. The fire essence kept the star metal at a perfect, brilliant heat. The air essence guided her strikes with impossible precision, and the water essence flowed through the steel, lending it a resilient, living flexibility. Into the glowing hilt, she set the iridescent feather from Lyra and the crystalline wolf shard, each gift from a guardian, bonding with the metal and causing it to sing with a soft, harmonious light. Her blade was becoming a symbol of unity, a testament to the alliances forged on her journey. Across the forge, Vorlag's work was a violent counterpoint. He hammered dark, jagged alloys into his own blade, quenching it not in water, but in a corrosive, violet energy from his obsidian shard. Where Alara's creation emanated a gentle radiance, his cast long, grasping shadows that seemed to drain the light from the very air. Each of his strikes was an act of domination, forcing the metal into a shape of pure control. The forge itself recoiled at this conflict of intent. With every blow, the chamber trembled. Fine cracks spider-webbed across the walls, and dust rained from the ceiling. The central moonstone flickered erratically, the chamber's stability directly tied to the two emerging creations. It was not just a physical contest. It was a battle for the soul of the place, and the mountain itself was groaning in protest. Vorlag saw her hesitation as the tremors worsened. He raised his voice over the din, his words a psychological weapon aimed at her spirit. He spoke of her mentor, not as a wise teacher, but as a man who had stood at this very anvil, his own heart divided, and had failed to complete his blade. He left this place, Borlag hissed, because he lacked the conviction to wield true power. The seed of doubt took root, whispering that she was doomed to repeat his failure, that her compassion was merely another word for weakness. Exhaustion tugged at her, and the doubt threatened to paralyze her hands. She looked at her nearly finished sword, beautiful and humming with potential, and knew it was not enough. To counter the absolute force of Vorlag's blade, to ensure its purpose could never be twisted, required a commitment deeper than skill or gathered power. It needed a piece of the Creator's own spirit. Without a second thought, Alara placed her hand flat upon the glowing hilt of her sword. She closed her eyes and willed a fragment of her own essence, a memory of her village at peace, her unwavering hope for balance, her very will to protect, into the metal. A searing flash of silver light enveloped her, and when it faded, she felt a permanent hollow space open within her, a personal cost willingly paid. The sword now glowed with an unwavering, serene light, its connection to her absolute and pure. The stakes were now irrevocably high. The two completed blades lay on their respective anvils, poised for the final quenching. One was a weapon meant to unite and preserve, the other a tool designed to conquer and command. The next blade to be tempered would resonate through the forge's core and become the new first blade, setting a precedent for all creation to follow. The forge's core, strained beyond its limits by the opposing energies, began to pulse like an angry heart. The air grew thick and heavy, charged with a power that was tearing itself apart. The violent reaction was building toward an inevitable, climactic explosion, and the choice of which blade would meet the quenching fluid first would decide everything. The forge core pulsed like a fading star, its light shifting between brilliant silver and a deep, unsettling violet. Alara's gaze moved from her own sword, now a vessel of serene light, to Vorlag's jagged weapon, which seemed to draw energy from the very air around it. She understood the truth in that moment. His blade was a tear in the fabric of things, and its completion would not only grant him power, it would unravel the forge itself, releasing a tide of decay into the world. A direct confrontation would only hasten that end. Breaking it was the only path, but not through force. It had to be undone by its own nature. Vorlag raised his dark blade high, his face a mask of furious triumph, as he readied his final strike. Elara did not meet his advance. Instead, she turned away, a gesture of profound defiance. She drove her own sword point first into the stone floor before the central Moonstone, not as a weapon, but as a channel. She poured every measure of the three essences and the last of her own strength into the blade, turning it inward, shaping a perfect sphere of solidified light around the forge's vulnerable heart. The move was a brilliant lure. Seeing her undefended and focused on shielding the core, Vorlag took the bait with a roar of contempt. He brought his corrupted blade down in a sweeping arc, aiming to shatter her sword and the barrier it sustained. The instant his weapon of pure domination struck her shield of absolute protection, a sound like a world breaking filled the chamber. The dark metal could not overcome a power rooted in selfless intent. It shattered violently, exploding into countless shards of shrieking violet energy. The freed corruption surged outward, a storm of pure malice that scorched the air and threatened to taint the forge's heart. Weakened and breathless, Alara did not yield. She dropped to her knees, her hands still wrapped around the hilt of her sword. She wove the last glimmer of her amulet's power, braiding the essences of fire, air, and water into one final, desperate net. She did not try to destroy the dark energy, knowing that would only scatter it further. Instead, she drew it all inward, pulling the swirling vortex of ambition and shadow toward her own blade. With a final whispered chant, she fused the corruption and the essences together, sealing them forever within the metal of her sword. The blade, once radiant, now settled into a deep and steady azure glow, its light holding the darkness in an eternal, quiet sleep. The effort cost her everything. The amulet at her chest grew dark and cool, a simple stone once more. As she slumped forward, the great moonstone at the forge's center dimmed, its light retreating into a soft, dormant pulse. The eternal fires faded, and the tools fell still. The forge had returned to its long slumber, its immediate crisis averted, but its active power gone. In the sudden, profound quiet, Borlag stared in stunned silence at the empty hilt in his hand, his ambition turned to dust. The remaining shadow smiths, their purpose broken, faltered and then retreated into the depths of the canyon, their threat dissolved. Elara's choice to protect rather than attack had not only saved the forge, it had undone the very belief of her foes. She had shown that the greatest strength lies not in the will to dominate, but in the courage to give of oneself for preservation. Her journey was complete, not with the ring of a weapon being forged, but with the quiet turn of a key, sealing away a great peril. She was no longer the apprentice who had left her village, seeking a legend. She was the legend itself, the guardian who had offered a part of her own spirit to keep the world in balance. Silence settled over the mountains like a held breath. Elara stood alone in the dormant chamber, the last echoes of conflict fading into the ancient stone. Her sword, now a deep and steady blue, rested peacefully in its scabbard, a silent guardian of the tempest it held within. The great moonstone above pulsed with a slow, sleeping rhythm, its light no longer a call to power, but a promise of watchful rest. She was not its master, for such a thing could never be mastered. She was its appointed keeper, the one who would ensure its slumber until a time came when another, with a heart tested and proven, would be needed. The journey back to her village was not a triumphant parade, but a quiet pilgrimage. She carried no legendary weapon on display, only the weight of her choices and the quiet hollow where a piece of her own spirit now resided. The elders who had once feared her departure now met her with a new, profound respect. They saw not the reckless girl who had left, but a woman forged in resolve, her eyes holding the calm of hard-won wisdom. She did not speak of conquest or glory. Instead, she returned to her anvil, her hands once again shaping simple tools and mending broken plows. Yet her work was different now. Every strike of her hammer carried the memory of the forge's song, a subtle harmony that seemed to linger in the metal, making it stronger, more resilient. She taught the younger apprentices that true craft was not about dominating the material, but about listening to it, about finding the balance between strength and flexibility, fire and patience. Her story, whispered from one generation to the next, became a new kind of legend. It was not a tale of a magical sword that won a great war, but of a choice that preserved peace. It spoke of compassion for guardians, respect for ancient spirits, and the courage to protect rather than to possess. The inert Moonstone amulet, which he kept on a simple cord, was no longer a key to power, but a reminder that some legends are meant to guide, not to control. The world was in balance, but it was a watchful balance. The memory of the shadow smiths served as a lasting lesson that the thirst for dominion never fully vanishes. Yet, in the steady glow of a village hearth and the diligent hands of a new generation of crafters, there was a resilient hope. Alara's greatest creation was not the blade she forged, but the legacy she left behind, a quiet understanding that the most enduring power is often found not in waking a sleeping giant, but in knowing why it must be allowed to dream.